And all right, all right. Good morning from Florida and good afternoon from Allie Houston with MetPsy. And where are you right now, Allie?
I am in Liverpool in the north of England and the home of the Beatles and a very beautiful city it is too. But I'm originally from Glasgow in Scotland, which is why I sound like Shrek.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can all tell by your accent that you're not from Liverpool. But are you a Beatles fan?
Huge Beatles fan.
Yeah, me too. Huge. I think they're probably the only band I know most of the words of their songs.
I just got tickets to see Paul McCartney in Manchester in December, so I'm super excited. I've never seen him before.
Wow, that is super exciting. Whew, I'm super green with envy. Okay, so Allie, tell me a little bit about your company and your study that you're getting ready to do.
Yeah, so the company's MetPsy, and it's short for metabolic psychiatry. And for people who don't know, that is a new and paradigm shift changing, really, medical specialty that is using metabolism, so how we make energy in the body, to improve people's mental health. And so in practice, that usually means looking at diet, so paleo or ketogenic or carnivore diet, and looking at lifestyle and how that can affect it. So, you know, heat, cold, light, exercise, connection, all of these things make a huge difference. And that's what it's really about, is coaching people to better mental health using the principles of metabolic psychiatry. And the thing that we're about to do is a short study for the public where we want to introduce continuous glucose monitor and Oura Ring, which measures heart rate variability and sleep quality and exercise, and see, how that correlates with mood and cognition. And that's in advance of a study that I'm going to be leading next year in University of Oxford in England to test ketogenic diet and MetPsy for ADHD with depression. And that's the plan over the next year or so. And that's what MetPsy is doing. It came from my transformation of mental health and going from being a physicist who was quite unwell to being whatever I am now and feeling good mentally.
That's fantastic. I think many of us have probably wondered in our daily what is affecting our moods and not even aware that it could be our diet. So the Oxford study, are you uh, does it's either ADHD or depression or ADHD and depression? Is it
Yeah, it'll be
all
people
three?
who, yeah, it'll be people who have a confirmed diagnosis of ADHD. There's hardly any research on lifestyle and ADHD in humans, and people will need to have that diagnosis, but then they can self-identify as having depressive symptoms, or they could be also diagnosed with depression, and we'll make sure to stratify that in the intervention group and the control group, and we'll match the groups as much as possible in terms of severity of depression, and hopefully that will, make it a fair comparison. And one of the reasons we chose ADHD with depression is that's what I had. And I also had anxiety, but what you tend to find is with psychiatric diagnoses that psychiatrists or psychologists, they're reading from a list of symptoms and then they have to make a judgment call about whether someone has that diagnosis. And there's so much crossover that ADHD and depression cross over massively clinically. And it'll be interesting to see from the data in the study how much each condition improves and to what extent they are similar, or even in some cases maybe misdiagnosed as one to the other, and that there's really elements that are the same thing there.
Sure, because way back when I was in nursing school, one of the areas was ADHD non-motivational. And that definitely would have been significant of depression, right? And then you had ADHD with the true hyperactivity, highly distractible, changing subjects. Definitely motivational into chaos, right? So you had two classifications of ADHD for that. So on the study, what age groups are you looking for? How many? And when are you closing the participant enrollment?
So with the Oxford study, it'll be adults in the UK who have an ADHD diagnosis, or it might be that we're able to, in some cases, provide a diagnosis if they're in the right place, and that they have depression symptoms or a depression diagnosis, and we'll be um, we'll be opening the recruitment for that hopefully later this year, and
Okay.
looking to start the study early next year. And for the pilot study, we're looking for people who have symptoms like brain fog, distractibility, low mood, um, and not really a particular diagnosis necessarily. And we'll be releasing information about that in the next week or two.
Okay, so the pilot study, is that also focused just in the UK?
Nope, it'd
Oh,
be
okay.
anyone anywhere pretty much, and we
Okay.
just want people to tell us, who they are, um, and why they're interested and what their background is like, and we'll do that through a recruitment form that we'll have on the website, and we're planning to launch that in a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's pretty exciting. So that pilot study, how long are you keeping that enrollment period open for?
So the plan is to get people to fill in their details, and we'll start contacting people who we think would be a good fit, and we'll enroll people stepwise. So we'll probably start with 6 to 12 people, go through it with them, and then when we think we're comfortable with that group, we'll onboard the next group, and so on. And the plan is to really coach people for about 12 weeks, and take data and ask them what they think about the process and see how they improve.
Wow, that's very exciting, both for you and for them.
Yeah,
So,
well,
okay, so if I have people I can send forward or recommend and give them the link to do that, what is the minimum age for that group?
that'll be adults as well. So anyone over 18, and they don't, they could be anywhere in the world. So
Okay.
we'll find that out from them, and it shouldn't make a difference as long as we can get the time zones right. Then we'll be able to do the coaching, and that'll be fine. Yeah, so we don't have the address yet, but we'll be able to share that very soon. So people can follow me on social media, Ali Transforms, and on Twitter and Instagram, or they can go to metsci.com and join the mailing list, and we'll be letting people know about all of that there. So watch this space; it'll be out very soon.
Oh, wonderful. Very exciting. So with that said, MetPsy, you developed this app and you're going to use this app for this pilot study for the
So
coaching?
the pilot study is not going to use the app. It's
Okay.
going to use a different system of collecting information. Although people can absolutely go on the app and get what they need from it, because I think there's good information. There's a supportive forum, and the aim is to do this pilot study to really empower us to supercharge the app so that by the time we do the Oxford study, we've got an updated version of it that is able to talk to continuous glucose monitor and to Oura Ring, and make the most of that data that people have always passively being collected compared to just coaching, which is great, but has a much slower kind of cycle time.
Sure. So the continuous glucose monitoring, that piece is going to be it's kind of exciting, right? To see the participants and what their monitors are showing and showing them, showing you about glucose and its effect on people's moods for all the reasons that everyone's going to learn. All right, with that
Yeah.
said, one of the interesting things I saw in your app is that you have an item about triggers. And triggers we talk about a lot, that especially people in mental health, that how much triggers can really influence our moment at that moment, or maybe that day, or even in the next couple of days, or a week, even in our life, if something triggers us. So one of them is weather, and I found that exceptionally interesting for me. I've always enjoyed weather. My dad was with the Federal Aviation Administration, so flying, so weather is a big deal for flying. So you're always checking the weather and what the weather conditions are and what the storms are around the world as you're traveling. And so as a kid, I've always been raised around weather. I've always liked weather. But unfortunately, I had a little ding in that relationship with weather. About a year and a half ago, I was living in Florida and Fort Myers, and Hurricane Ian wound up making a pretty significant turn to Fort Myers and caused probably some of the worst damage that area has ever seen. And might have been a pretty large search and rescue, maybe one of the top three of our country. So it was a really big deal. And it definitely changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life, changed where I live, changed what I'm doing, and probably pushed me into keto for mental health harder than I've ever been. That was about the time period. About a month after that, I did Dr. Georgia Eads' course, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. So I became a keto mental health advocate as a nurse. And so I wanted to ask you how weather became part of your app. And so you know how significant I think there's a group of people here in Florida in hurricane season feel that weather triggers are. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting having suffered from migraines all my life and far, far less since I went keto, but the weather is a trigger for my migraines.
Hmm.
And so, whether it's the pressure or something else, it's clear that that's a trigger for a lot of people. And there's something metabolic going on there. So I think sunshine and the effect that that can have on metabolism is very clear. And you know, there's something called the Glasgow effect in UK medicine, and it's about my hometown Glasgow, where even compared to cities like Liverpool or Manchester that are kind of, in a sense, post-industrial, they've got the same problems with um, poverty and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
that Glasgow's just worse, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people think it's because it's that bit further north. So you just get less vitamin D, you get less UV, which is so good for us if we're not burning. And I think the weather can affect us in multiple different ways. We all know that we're happier on average when you wake up and it's a nice sunny day. So I think there's multiple different ways that the weather can affect mental health. And looking at triggers like that, I think what we hope is that if we take something like continuous glucose monitor and Oura Ring data, that you'll be able to see things like weather or other triggers coming out of the data. So, for example, you can imagine using your phone's location data, and maybe it works out that every time you go to a particular location, the CGM and URA data shows that you're about to have a mental health episode, and
Wow.
you and you could ask the question, what's going on at that location? Is it a McDonald's and you're binging on food that's causing that, or is it you visited an uncle who you don't like, and the effect on your metabolism is just as bad. And I think being agnostic about what we'll find is important because we can have ideas about what will trigger us, but until we measure it and log it, we don't know. I think that's the great thing about wearables is it doesn't have the human element, which I think is why we still need coaching. but it does have this ability to pick out information that we don't necessarily have ourselves or as coaches. And so, whether it's weather, location, different foods, heat, cold, light, connection, a sense of purpose and meaning, sense of belonging, all of these things can make a huge difference to our metabolism. And so I think, even down to individual foods, where people are extremely sensitive, you find that dairy can be a massive issue, different plants can be a massive issue, spices can be an issue. You hear about people having bipolar disorder,
Mm.
being triggered by the strangest things, cinnamon and you name it almost. There's a whole list. So I'm very curious still, even though I know that some people have these triggers, to find other ones that will hopefully be useful and will provide a particular signature in the data so that if other people are getting these signatures, then we can maybe say, have you tried cutting out this, that, or the other thing and see if it helps.
Wow, that's super exciting. I mean, it's kind of chilling. The hairs on my arms were standing up because to imagine that a trigger or an event in your day could spike your glucose, I think is not a concept that a lot of people would even consider or even
Mm,
comprehend that, wow, I just gave myself and I'm going to call it fight or flight response.
yeah.
So that's what's happening. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that they're having this fight or flight response that's being set off from a trigger for one, something that in their past their mind remembers and that it wasn't associated well. And then they think, I've got to run or I've got to freeze. And then their metabolism shoots a glucose spike. And there you go. Your CGM reads it. Wow, that's kind of like validating, particularly both for clinician, but for someone who's suffering from the after effects of these spikes of glucose, having to deal with it and not knowing that they were it was a trigger for them, and they don't have any idea why they just felt like running down the street because they think a tiger was chasing them.
Yeah, exactly. And then
You
when they
know?
have a chat with their coach, then there's just too much going on to know which pieces of information to relay to the coach, and the coach isn't going to know what to ask if it's over and above what have you been eating or drinking or um, you know these triggers can be quite individual. So although you can catch a great number of people and help them with broad principles, I'm
Mhm.
more interested now in working out what about the people for whom keto doesn't immediately help. And
Sure.
that's a large chunk. It's a bit
I think
like
so.
epilepsy, where there's a third of people who their seizures just stop, a third of people where maybe there's a bit of an effect, but it's not as much as they want, and then a third of people who it's not really helping. So, what about those two thirds where we need a lot of optimization? And so that's where we hope that this data will really help.
Sure. And then the other thing, which uh, is how long does someone need to be on in ketosis, really following it closely before their body adjusts and starts to be able to manage those reactions and those glucose spikes better. Because if it's been a lifetime of triggers since birth, like some people, I have a daughter who had open heart surgery at 11 months old. She's spent a lifetime with triggers from birth, from being in the NICU and the monitors going off. She used to throw temper tantrums at McDonald's when the French fry beeper went off at 2. And you're like, well, a 2-year-old can't tell you. You just know it was a trigger for her. She remembered
Mm.
these monitors in the NICU. And she was like, oh, no, I'm not going there again.
Yeah, the primal
You
fear.
know,
Yeah.
sure, sure.
Yeah, and David Unwin talks about in his patient data that the people who've been ill for longest have the largest absolute gains to make, but the people who've caught it early can actually get back to baseline. So, people who've been ill for decades quite often can't get back to baseline, can't get back to the set point that they would want to be at as completely metabolically healthy people, but they do make absolutely massive gains. There's some
Right.
huge turnarounds. And
Ugh.
I think that's probably going to be true of mental health as well, that there can be long-term damage done with chronic neuroinflammation, but that you see amazing stuff. I've had a client who had a schizophrenia diagnosis 25 years ago, and when she got to the bottom of the what was wrong with her, she, got better completely. And diet was a part of that, but so, there was further functional medicine tests to be done, and it turned out to be she had a severe fungal overgrowth, and took systemic antifungals and got better. So
Interesting. Fungal
yeah.
overgrowth and that probably the start of that was due to diet. I think a
Yeah,
fungal overgrowth is not as uncommon as we think. But
absolutely.
how do you recognize it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you have sugar abundance. I mean, some of the skin disorders that are fungal related, they're obvious, but maybe some of the others are subtle.
Yeah, I think more broadly, functional medicine principles can really guide us in looking at beyond just the ketogenic diet. I think people who don't get better straight away using a ketogenic diet can look at these functional medicine principles and dig a bit deeper and find something that can help them.
Mhm. So people really need to be an advocate for themselves. This is just, I mean, a provider is just not going to go down the long list of things that need to be checked out as a normal visit. People really need to advocate for themselves or find
Yeah.
someone that'll advocate for them, like you or like me.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm all for a team approach, and I'm happy to talk with doctors who need some help understanding why someone might be doing this,
Mhm.
and to try to bring them on board, because if someone's being prescribed something, then they need to work with their prescriber, because that's not what I do. So yeah, I think people don't realize that they're in charge. They think the doctor's in charge. And so my job, as my friend Sarah says, is to give people the tools of the trade and the rules of the game, and then let them grasp the nettle and do it.
Boy, that is very, very significant in someone's life. Giving them the tools, but also empowering them to know it's their journey and their fight with those tools. I mean, you can fight a battle pretty good when you have the right tools and you have a team and you have an army behind you.
That's
So
it.
that's the key, right? One of the keys. Well, great.
Absolutely.
This has been fantastic. You've definitely given me a fair share of your time today. I know you're very busy. So I look forward to another session with you when you have time, and I think listeners will too. You have a lot to say. And MetPsy is doing a lot to have an app that can, I think, tracks triggers. To me, when I heard that the first time you said it, I was like, what a concept.
Mhm.
So I applaud you on that. And I really look forward to how that plays out because I'm a firm believer in triggers spiking glucose and that people just don't even recognize it. So the fact that they will have an app that will track their glucose and their trigger is really awesome.
Thanks,
So
Patricia.
thank you. Thank you for all your work and your journey and bringing it to so many people. And Allie, have a great day in Liverpool. Take a walk across Abbey Road for me. And we'll talk to you next time.
Okay, thanks,
All right.
Patricia.
Bye. See if I can end this. How do I end it? Okay, stop recording. I figured it out.